do, 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 do. Da, 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 dee, dum. June of 2019, I rode in a Pride ride sponsored by my employer, Trek Bicycles. COVID caused a long pause on our June Pride rides, and I was out of town driving up the East Coast with my wife, son, daughter in law, and 6-year-old grand one during last June's Pride ride. But this year, I got to lead the 5K short kids route. As would be expected, we finished our Sunday, June 30th 3-mile ride in far less time than the main group took to complete their 10 miles. And after ushering my wards back to Trek Cary and thanking them, they tootled away, and I slipped into the service area of the store and began assembling bikes. I didn't stay in the back very long, as our post-Pride ride accommodations included a brats and hot dogs cookout, ice cream treats, and soda pop. And I may have wound up overindulging in all of the above while going about my work shift. Though I'd already tasted one flavor of our mini ice cream pops, I returned to the showroom where the treats-filled cooler called to me from the main entrance. While heading to the cooler, I noticed a near-age mate woman sitting on her couch. I skedaddled over to her, smiled, and asked if she was all right. I'd spoken with both her and her former truck driver husband prior to the ride, and we'd had friendly chit-chat that included discussion about my wife having retired on Friday, June 28th, which led to discussion about working part-time versus not at all between the three of us. I hadn't caught their names, but our banter had been light and friendly and included discussions about where in New York they'd grown up, a fact made rather obvious by their accents. Having lived in Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island, they were 5-borough folks, and I slipped in the Grand Falloon that my wife had grown up about an hour north of the city in Brewster, New York. This Grand Falloon led to a short Wampatier discussion about That Girl, a TV show with Brewster ties that ran from autumn of 1966 to spring of 71 sitcom. Light, fluffy discussion that had introduced us to one another and paved the way for what was to follow. I asked Edelweiss if she was all right. Not her real name. We didn't properly introduce ourselves. And she assured me she was, now that she was out of the hot sun, had plenty to drink, and could just relax and wait for her husband's return. Edelweiss assumed I knew what was going on. Hardly ever the case anymore. But I understood immediately that the heat had been too much for her, and she'd been transported back to Cary via our van and was now resting and sipping water while waiting for her husband to return. I nodded to the mini refrigerator next to her and said, "That's full of fizzy water. Would you like one?" "No, no," she said, in her still very noticeable but not too thick Brooklynese. I'm fine. I'll just sit here in the AC, sip my water, and wait for my husband." "Water, huh?" I said with a wink and a nod. That's one of my wife's 12 words she still pronounces like a New Yorker. To be honest, I haven't done an official count, but water and coffee are definitely two that come up frequently, I confided, providing the two words with my best Brooklyn accent, thus giving them more of an NYC flavor than my wife would. "Oh, yeah, she said. Certain words just tell the whole story." Edelweiss and I continued chatting, but our friendly conversation kept taking macabre twists that included her confiding that her grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. A survivor who lost his parents, his siblings, and many other family members to the Nazi torture, humiliate, and used Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals as lab rats' death camps. We shared stories that included both her mother and mine having been placed in orphanages 100 years ago while our grandmothers were institutionalized. Discussion of laws from suicide of those who, being castigated, ostracized, humiliated, arrested, and beaten for the sin of being other couldn't bear the stone after stone burdens of life. At times I became emotional, and at times she did. And though we sat 2 meters apart, we were side by side in compassion and disbelief over man's inhumanity to man and the ongoing hatred of the evil other who must celebrate Pride in order to feel the sun on their faces. rather than the pills in their throats, the gun to their temple, or the noose around their necks. People as fully human and deserving of love, acceptance, and pride as anyone else, but who are still spat upon, castigated, and demonized. At the end of our discussion, Edelweiss and I offered comfort to one another concerning our shared stories of personal grief, as well as those of family and, of course, repressed, demonized, and hunted minorities in general. It may not have been a light and breezy conversation, but it was well worth the 15 minutes we took to affirm every human's right to love, respect, and basic humanity. Celebrating pride matters because it has to.